Hello there commanders and welcome to SUNTZU Guide to Greek Archers. In this guide we are going to cover how to pick your targets, best utilize your commander, deal with threats and maximize your damage thanks to some tips and tricks even the veteran players may not have known before. Sun Tzu said, "Water shapes its course according to the nature of the ground over which it flows. The soldier works out his victory in relation to the foe whom he is facing. Therefore, just as water retains no constant shape, so in warfare there are no constant conditions." That is especially true for archers, who don't have a clearly defined unit type they counter, and therefore must constantly adapt to the ever-changing situation on the battlefield to reach their full potential. That's why, in this guide we are going to focus on the underlying principles behind archer gameplay that will allow you to make the best decisions no matter the battlefield circumstances nor patch notes. As an archer player, your main role on the battlefield is to provide support by dealing damage to key targets. Therefore, the most important skill you will need to learn is target selection. After all, you will be using it all the time. As your archers have long range and inconsistent damage, they will very often have multiple targets within their reach, with a varying degree of importance, and it is your job to pick the right one. In order to master your target selection skills, first you will need to be aware of all the different factors that weigh in on that decision. The easiest factor to calculate is damage you can deal to your target. Is it lightly or heavily armored? What is its missile block, and does it have an ability that can increase it? Is it under the effect of any debuffs? Is the unit behind an obstacle? Is it turned towards you or exposed in its back? Can it turn or not? Can it dodge your volley or not? All these variables will affect the damage you'll end up dealing to your target. Don't be discouraged by the number though, with some experience it will all come to you naturally. Then comes the second factor, that is much harder to calculate and you'll mostly need to rely on your experience and intuition. That factor is threat. How big of a threat is the target to your team? Does it need to be dealt with immediately, or is there a more imminent threat? If your target is a ranged unit, can it shoot you back? Can you win that range duel convincingly enough? Is there an enemy ranged unit that could shoot you, or a melee unit that could attack you if you choose to attack your target? Sometimes shooting a target that you will deal less damage to, but is a bigger threat, will become a higher priority. The third and final factor are battlefield benefits. If there is an additional reward involved, such as a watchtower, a capture point, a base, or even a key position like a hill or a cliff, you'll need to factor that in too when considering which enemy to target. Then, if an allied unit is nearby and would suffer friendly fire, you'll need to calculate all these previously mentioned factors for that friendly unit as well, plus all the additional factors that come with friendly fire situations such as your accuracy, size of the target, and your range and angle at which you're shooting from, that will all affect the amount of friendly fire you'll deal. At the moment, the only viable commander choice for Greek archers is Kynane. You can get away with taking Miltiades due to his superior mobility, but that's the only advantage he holds over Kynane. Kynane's first skill is Hand. It gives you vision on the target for the ability's duration. As you level it up, it will gain additional utility, namely missile block, speed, and morale debuffs. It's a very versatile tool for an archer player, as you can make a great use of all aspects of this ability. You can use it to keep vision of targets that try to hide from you in a fog of war, to keep shooting them when you otherwise couldn't, and to prevent being ambushed by them. Speed and missile block debuffs will increase the damage you deal to the target, as well as help your allies deal with it. The morale debuff is very small and will work only in very specific situations, but it's another good long-range tool that you can help your allies with. Rapid Advance is a very straightforward ability. It makes your unit run faster. You can use it pretty much all the time it is off cooldown to get around the battlefield faster, but at times you might want to save it for a situation when you need to dodge a charge or enemy missiles, or to improve your kiting. Barrage is another very simple skill. It's a short boost to your reload speed that will allow you to deal burst damage to key targets. Because of its long cooldown, you should wait until a good enough target to use it on is available, and make sure that there won't be any better targets before Barrage comes off cooldown again. It's often a very good idea to use Hand on the unit you're going to barrage to maximize the damage it will deal. Depending on the tier, Greek archers have a different set of skills, but they are all pretty straightforward too. Dash is a short boost to speed. Use it together with rapid advance. Strain is a boost to range that after expiring will leave your unit slowed down for a few seconds, so make sure you use it only when it's safe. It's a good idea to use it together with Barrage if your target is at the edge of your range. Snipe is a stronger version of Strain that on top of bonus range increases your damage too, but has a longer period of slowdown. Definitely use it always together with Barrage, unless it would be too dangerous to do so due to the slowdown penalty. The last unit ability that appears on Greek archers is Rapid Shot. It increases your reload speed, but if you are using Kenane, this skill will be replaced by Barrage. If you are not using Kenane, then you can use it as a mini Barrage. Finally, there is Focus Fire, an ability present on all ranged units. Simply use it to maximize your damage by shooting it between your regular volleys, avoiding friendly fire and predicting enemy dodges. Archers are obviously very fragile units, so they heavily rely on their teammates to protect them. In return, archers are able to tip engagements in their team's favor and secure victory in the long run. Stay close to allied melee infantry units for protection, and hide behind them when you see an incoming threat. If there are no allies nearby to protect you, try to dodge enemy charges by constantly changing your direction. Wait until the enemy activates their charge and then turn by 90 degrees. If you outnumber the units pursuing you, split up and start shooting your pursuers in the back while still trying to dodge their charge with pursued units. It's also unwise to engage in range duels unless you are sure to win them convincingly. Take important cooldowns such as Barrage into account when determining whether or not to engage in a range duel. Range advantage and pressure provided by allies are equally as important. In general, you should focus on dealing damage to the enemy while taking none in return, unless it's worth doing otherwise. A basic archer tactic is to follow melee units and support them the best you can. Stick to the principles of target selection and to allied melee units for protection, and you will be an above average player. For those who want to be even better, we have a few tips and tricks that will help you maximize your damage and usefulness to your team. First trick is the bread and butter of any ranged unit, using your focus fire between your regular volleys to maximize your damage. Because focus fire doesn't affect your reload at all, you can just use it after a regular volley for a mini barrage of volley, focus fire volley, for a bit of additional damage every 8 seconds. You can also use focus fire to predict enemy dodges. Regular volleys are always aimed where the enemy would be based on their direction and speed at the time of shooting. Obviously, your enemies will try to dodge your volleys by changing speed or direction. You can aim your focus fire where you think the enemy will dodge and increase your damage that way. Another way of combining focus fire and your ability to predict enemy movements is shooting blindly into the fog of war. If your enemy has just disappeared into the fog of war, it's very likely that he'll continue moving in the same direction for at least a few more seconds. If you don't have any better targets for your focus fire, it's always worth trying to blindly snipe an enemy unit. You can use it as a scouting tool that way too. Sometimes, your target is so entangled with an allied unit that you can't shoot them with a regular volley, because the amount of friendly fire you would inflict would outweigh the amount of damage you would deal to the enemy. But sometimes, there is a small portion of the enemy unit that isn't entangled and could be shot with focus fire. It will allow you to deal damage in situations where you otherwise couldn't. Alternative way to avoid dealing excessive friendly fire in the exact same situation is to move your unit to such a place that only the non-entangled portion of the enemy unit is within your range. That way, your unit will target only the soldiers that are within your range, rather than an entire enemy unit. You can obviously combine it with the focus fire version of this method for a maximum damage thanks to the mini barrage trick. Remember the prediction aiming mechanic? It is a double-edged sword that can be used against you if you're not careful. Don't shoot at enemy units that are charging into combat. They will ram into your allied unit and therefore suddenly stop, while your archers who didn't take that into account will end up shooting your allies because of that. You can use focus fire in situations like these if you don't have any better targets to shoot at. In order to increase your damage even further, make sure there aren't any obstacles between your unit and your target. The obstacles include terrain features, allied units, and your own units, including when they are stacked on top of one another. If any of these will get in your way, your archer units will shoot in a high arc instead of a low arc to avoid hitting the obstacle. If your archers will shoot in a flat arc, your volleys will be much harder to dodge and more accurate. You will almost always want to reposition your units to get a better angle or to move to a safer position. By sacrificing a bit of your speed, you won't have to sacrifice any of the damage if you move while reloading. It's another basic tactic that you'll want to use all the time. Obviously, going into melee with archers is a silly idea. There are exceptions, however. Just like any other unit in the game, archers are able to flank enemy units and make them rout. Just make sure you will actually rout the enemy when you go into melee, otherwise you'll start suffering heavy casualties. High risk, high reward. And finally, if you play in a party, the single best partner you can have is Miltiades with spearmen and or pikes. Fast enough to keep up with you, sturdy enough to stop any incoming charges, and powerful enough to hold off most of the biggest threats. Other than that, any heavy or medium infantry or cavalry will do. Just don't take too many ranged units, or you won't be able to form a coherent frontline, and you'll end up in another ranged meta meme video. Thank you for watching our first Sun Tzu guide. Please let us know your thoughts about it and maybe share some advice of your own in the comment section below. And while you're there, please leave a like, subscribe, and join our community through the links in the description if you haven't already, to help us bring Arena back to the West. If you're interested in seeing some examples of the practical application of the theory laid out in this guide, consider watching one of our replay commentaries. Or, if you're thirsty for more knowledge, you can continue watching Sun Tzu guides on our playlist. And with that, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you on Arena's battlefields, Commanders.